I don't know, I just need a starting point for whatever it is I'm going to do. And I always loved 'Twas Brillig and the Slithy Toves did gyre and gimble in the way. I mean, to be able to just spew stuff like that out of your mouth, and I have no idea what it means.
It means something, but only, if you look at it in a slightly different way. I mean, it doesn't offer you anything other than the sounds. And the sounds are rather wonderful.
I think Terry's picked up the baton and taken that imaginative piece of literature and run with it.
I'd seen, of course, the Holy Grail in the series, and so I knew about Terry, I knew about the Pythons, but I wanted to work with him as a director, doing his own thing.
Lewis Carroll was one of the writers that was, I think, most important to me, because the freedom that he allowed one to go into his worlds is amazing. Constantly shifting, nothing is solid, everything is reforming, transforming.
Terry enjoys the nonsense of that language and where that might unlock your mind and send you off on other journeys. Frabtious and bandersnatch and things that you can really, really, really relish on your tongue. He then takes you visually away into another world and imaginatively into another existence.
I've never even understood the whole mathematical side of Lewis Carroll, which all the nerds really get into. I don't have a clue about that. I just know the characters, the situations they're all put in are fantastic.
I think Terry lives in a different world from most of us. He roams away, allows himself still that childlike thing of exploring and things are new to him. It's not that he has confined himself to what most of us confine ourselves to, of daily existence. He can go off on fabulous tangents.
There was a monster, and there's a vorpal blade, and a bit of snicky snack went on. And there's so that you've got a hero, you've got a problem, boom.
The Jabberwocky poem is something you was kind of brought up with, and also Alice in Wonderland and nonsense and all that. There wasn't a lot of that around when I was growing up. There was television, it wasn't television, mainly radio sitcom and all that sort of thing. But it was all basically a number of characters reacting in a fairly realistic situation. So nonsense, when you came across it, good nonsense, was rather valued. And of course, Spike Milligan was the purveyor of nonsense when we were growing up. And a lot of Spike is there in Monty Python, and I think in Jabberwocky as well.
The whole project began because Sandy Leverson and David Putnam at the time, who were partners in crime, they asked me to make an animated film, and it was going to be called World War III and All That, or something like that. And it was going to be all these Beatles songs going on. And I started working on it, but I seemed to be distracted by this other idea that floated in my head until one day I was at a meeting with them, and Sandy says, "What would you rather be doing than this? Because I can see you're distracted." And I said, "Well, I've got an idea. I want to make a film called Jabberwocky about the poem." And he said, "Okay."
Having read the poem, it was then finding out how that poem was going to be interpreted and how it would be developed into a screenplay. It sounds complicated, but it wasn't. Terry had a vision of what he saw in Jabberwocky, and he had a friend, Charles Alverson, who would be co-writing it with him. So you had to take a chance with Terry. And I felt taking a chance making that kind of a movie based on the poem would pay off in the end. And I think it did.
I went to Chuck Alverson because he was my American friend. So I wasn't going to be working with the Pythons, no sirree. And Chuck, we go way back. We go back to 1962 in New York. There was a magazine called Help magazine, edited by Harvey Kurtzman, the man who gave us Mad Comics. And so Chuck, I arrived in New York, and I had no place to stay, so he put me up on his couch for a while. And we became good friends in New York, and Chuck was always a good writer. He was funny, he was sharp, acerbic, great.
And they took, 4 or 5 months. We had the script. We had Terry. I put the deal together very quickly, and then 76, later in 76, we were shooting. That was it. So it was unusual, that you have an idea to do something, and then within a couple of years or 18 months, you can actually do it.
This was a time when Python was hot. We were hot. And so when you're hot, you're a magnet. So people come running forward. They're willing to do it and take a chance because they assumed I knew what I was doing. I'd been co-director of Holy Grail, which is a big success. They wanted to be part of it.
Interestingly enough, raising the finance was easy. I had worked before together with John Goldstone and was a very good friend of Michael White. So they put a substantial amount of money in. I got the rest from Columbia Pictures and the sale to Rugoff Cinema 5 in the US. I was very worried about how you're going to control the cost on a film like this. But in talking to Terry about it, how it was going to be interpreted, I felt comfortable that we could make it on a really modest budget, somewhere around £500,000. And even in those days, it wasn't a lot of money for making a film. It didn't have to, be gigantic. It just had to suit the purpose of the Jabberwocky. So we talked through the script, in some ways scene by scene, because I had to feel confident that we could make it for that price. And I did it in a partnership with Terry. I think he felt that he had a sense of responsibility, that because we were working like this, that he was going to make it for that budget.
But I just wanted to really create my own world without having to be Pythonic in the way we were dependent on the sketch form. Because Holy Grail is purely a sketch film that we've smudged something over it to make it look like it's about something else. And I just wanted the long form, let's say, it intrigued me, the storytelling part. I could make jokes when I wanted to. I could be romantic when I wanted to. I could do adventure. I wanted to do all of what is film.
As we began the casting, John Cleese made it very clear that he would object strenuously to any association with the Pythons. But because of Terry's relationship with Michael Palin and Terry Jones and Neil Innes, etc., they all wanted to work on the film, not as a Python movie, but as Terry Gilliam's Jabberwocky.
Mike, of all the Pythons, was the one that each of us wanted to work with. Mike was the funniest, the best actor, and it was perfect that he should play the lead because he has innocence.
There were a number of little things that Terry and I kind of understood about the character. One is that although he's terribly naive and wide-eyed, he's one of these dreadful sort of modern businessmen. He's got all this idea about we can do this better if we invest in this and we invest in that. I mean, a very crucial scene in the film was that opening scene with his father and all that. Something which was very, very close to Terry's heart, I think, is the difference between craftsmanship and business.
My father was a carpenter. And the idea of the beauty of the wood and the work, the craft. And then there's the son that comes along who just wants to make money. That's a good starting point. And the fairy tale where you get everything everybody's dreamed of, the princess's hand, half the kingdom and all that, but it's not what you want. You wanted this really banal, miserable, empty, almost middle-class world.
We never discussed it in great detail about how I was going to play it, because Terry kind of generally doesn't do that. He's not that comfortable with sort of talking through the whole thing with actors. Terry employs actors because they act, Come on, you guys, you know what to do. I'm going to be getting the lighting. I'm going to make this tree move around. I'm going to make this huge beast rear up. You just get your lines right. And that's quite liberating in a sense. So I think I must have just taken it at face value.
Griselda is actually a tiny part, but because she throws that potato, the love object, out of the window, which is just for her a rotten potato and becomes an emblem of love for Dennis, she gets carried literally through the film, not because I'm there and you actually see her, but through Dennis's love for her. And, the soldier saying, oh, she must love you a lot to given you this, this time of famine.
Potato just is an inert thing. And the fact that he hangs on to it with such persistence throughout the film. And I think a bit of it's been eaten, I seem to remember. Yes, there's a bite out of it, which of course makes it even more important to him that there's a bite, his lover's taken a bite out of it.
Dennis is starving, but he won't eat his love token. It's pathetic.
She seeks the night, she seeks something else, and Dennis doesn't provide that.
When I saw her for Griselda, my first response was I was slightly frightened whether it would be too over the top, because we, through the makeup and the wardrobe, you exploited the fact that she wasn't just, another pretty actress. She was big and powerful and strong.
And I knew they wanted someone unattractive and as heavy as possible. So for my interview, I don't look good in orange. Orange is not my colour. So I had an orange scarf tied really tightly to sort of puff everything up. I wore glasses. But Sandy and Terry were just glorious to meet and full of energy and life. I actually put weight on for the film. I'd lost a bit of weight beforehand, so in being cast, it gave me a license to eat lots of rice pudding and baked beans for a few months.
I think everything in the film is cartoon-ish. Everything is pushed to the limit. It's made more grotesque, more deformed. You're either taller, shorter, wider, anything. Whether it's, Warren Mitchell with these extra teeth in there, which were even more dirty than not his own teeth. Everything, I was distorting people all the time, whether Jean Lemaitre, you put a hat on him that stretches him that way. Max Wall is sort of squished this way and that. So it was really the work of a cartoonist. I mean, the initial ideas for the look of the film came from Hieronymus Bosch and Peter Bruegel, two of my favorite painters. They created the Middle Ages, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Bosch was more surrealistic, more grotesque, more strange. And in that sense, I suppose, Bruegel was a greater influence.
Suddenly it clicked, that Terry's doing Bruegel. I think it was Warren Mitchell with his arse stuck out of the window. I mean, that appears on lots of Bruegel sort of paintings and all that. The idea was that if you were going to look back on the Middle Ages, it was not going to be like the Hollywood version, which was Camelot, which was clean teeth and bright eyes, and everyone looking like they were in the 20th century.
We chose Shepperton to shoot the film in because, one, it was a bit cheaper than Pinewood or some of the other studios, and it had a standing set. It had the Oliver set and a set from an opera film that had been done. And so we cannibalized that. Something, it's not an unusual thing to do. The whole Italian cinema is based on when you finish a film, immediately a second film comes in and takes over the sets and shoots another movie.
Watching the film last night, it just reminded me how beautiful it is. And much of that is down to Terry Bedford, who's a DP on it. Now, Terry had been a commercials director. He'd really trained under Ridley Scott. And what was great about Terry, he's not afraid of shadows, darkness. The castle is all black, basically, except there's light filtering down into this corridor or that place. There's just black material on the walls, blacking it out. We made these boxes that were basically about a meter thick and about so wide, and they're basically windows so you see the depth of the wall, but just black velvet comes up to and that's it. That's our set.
We found two castles in Wales that would ultimately be one castle, but you're shooting both of them, some exterior and some interior, and combining them. And that's the way we worked right through the film. Bits and pieces from all kinds of locations. So it was very atmospheric and very good. It gave the impression of hundreds of people, if not thousands, living outside of the walls, starving to death.
I can remember when I was quite young, hearing from my parents that Max Wall was disapproved of and had been asked to sort of stop performing in certain places because of the way he walked. sticking his bottom out in a certain way. I mean, we're talking about 1950s, early 1960s.
Now, right now, if people watch the film, they would have no idea how famous and important those great comic actors are that are playing the main characters. Warren Mitchell was, of course, Till Death Us Do Part, one of the great comic characters, awful character, great right-wing, racist, xenophobic, perfect for Mr. Fishfinger. They just brought high-class comic caricatures to the thing, and it probably helped us get the money, whatever little money we got. Max Wall was the most sort of Neanderthal, medieval comic out there, and you then balance him with John LeMessurier from Dad's Army, who is always slightly distant, always held back and rather elegant. A kid growing up in the countryside of Minnesota, not many castles around the place, not too many knights or princesses. These are the things if you start reading books, you get lost in these worlds. They were great fantasy worlds. What I liked about the Middle Ages in particular, it's very structured. You have a king, you have a princess, you've got a knight that does, you know what their jobs are, you know what they represent. It's very clear. So now let's turn them upside down. Let's turn them this way, do it that way. The king is nothing is majestic about the king. He's a terrible little middle kind of creature you'd find in medieval manuscripts. The merchants, on the other hand, are elegant, richly dressed, tall, good-looking people. So we're making points about things rather than merchants sort of scrambling around why the king is beautiful. No, it's the other way around, the reality of economics.
There's an underlying politics in Python, which was there when we talked, generally feeling that the country was run by people with a singular lack of imagination. What Python was trying to say was open it up, let people think up things for themselves, let people be different, roll on diversity, to hell with this sort of idea that everybody must behave the same. And also that politicians didn't really say ever what they really meant to say in public. And that was just something that wasn't a great political credo by any means, but it is an alternative look at society. And I think that Terry was trying to put in Jabberwocky a lot of figures from the establishment. And I think that Terry was also feeling what we all felt, was that people are basically not that very different to the way they were 500, 1,000 years ago. You've got the same scoundrels, the same ruffians, the same simpletons, the same sort of beautiful people, the same ugly people, the same ambitions,
It was interesting being a woman in that world because it's extremely male-orientated. And Griselda is nothing if not a realist. She very much lives in the solid world. And the princess doesn't. She lives in a fantasy world. So we were intrigued to talk about our place in the world as women and what we represented and the male attitude to us and how we would be perceived by the audience.
The makeup and hair was all done by my wife, Maggie. Boy, was she good. That's why I married her. The work is just stunning. The costumes which Hazel Peth did are unbelievable. And we had no money. And yet it's as beautiful as anything I've ever seen. And it's people trained at the BBC and having to be good at everything and every detail is just great. And Deborah with her blonde, that's a wig. That's not her, but it's totally believable. It's just golden straw. I mean, all the makeup, whether it's beards, whether it's hair, whether it's Harry Corbett having to wear a wig over his own wig, they're just flawlessly done.
I'd already done my first television film, but I'd never been in a feature. So the process was much longer than I would anticipate and far more detailed. And of course, I had a wig and, they put strong eyebrows on me and things like that with my little medieval bonnet and my long hair.
We actually had a guy named Terry English who was a real armorer. We've got people who actually understand this stuff. And when you do costumes and makeup, hair and armor, and it's with people who aren't just superficial, they get it. They're really deep into it. So now we can really play at another level that is, whether the public appreciates, I don't know, but I know I appreciate when I watch it. The knights were just tin cans. You never saw anybody in the knight suit. They were just these great, okay, maybe it's from Wizard of Oz, it's the Tin Man, but much heavier.
The way the beast is dealt with, I think, is superb. Very often in films like that, everything works until you see the actual monster or the actual source of the horror, and then suddenly you feel, oh, well, maybe it's not as horrifying as when you don't see it. But in Jabberwocky, it is more horrifying when you do see it. It's a wonderful creature. And quite frightening. I mean, Terry did a great job, and all the designers, with that monster.
I got a call from Stanley Kubrick to say, oh, I just saw your film, Jabberwocky. How much did you make that for? 500,000 pounds. How the hell did you do that for 500,000 pounds? He says, impossible. Let me see the budget. And that is, the nature of the film. In some respects, it seems impossible to do for that amount of money. But we did it.
We hope for things, we struggle, we desire, and the big foot just comes down and squashes us all the time. And the Jabberwock comes along and eats you up, and it's really difficult, or you get, covered in blood by life. I think the film is a great deal about how we struggle as human beings and how difficult it is to attain our desires.
First of all, the reviews were mixed. This isn't a Python film, but it isn't quite, original enough. They didn't look at the film and say, hey, what are the elements of the film that really stand out and that are unique and strong? They were very superficial reviews. We got a couple of good ones in New York. I think the New York Times one was pretty good. But ultimately, the film is financially very successful. And where it proved to be profitable was on home video. So yeah, the cinema release was disappointing. But I've had a life full of films that don't get good reviews at the beginning. My first one, Performance, was a disaster, and then becomes a cult movie. And Blade Runner, that was a disaster. It was in and out of the cinemas in 1 week, and universally bad reviews. And then all of a sudden it becomes this gigantic cult classic. It's not the same satisfaction, though. When you put your film out there, you want an audience to respond to it. And when they don't, you think, God, the effort that we put into this, and this is what the response is, it's incredibly disappointing. And then later, it happens, and these films find an audience.
I could very much see Terry, the director, in this film, and also the precursor of all the films he was going to do. It had a very strong visual quality. There was a visual unity in Jabberwocky, which is there in Brazil, and it's there in 12 Monkeys, and it's there in Zero Theorem, and nearly all the other films that Terry does, because he's got a way of looking at the world and adding in his own sort of extraordinary imaginative images and his own inventions. And I think that's the great strength.